All right, welcome to PhillyXP, everyone. Today, our speaker is Paige Watson. So I'm going to hand it off to Paige, let him introduce himself and get underway.
Great, I'm going to share. Maybe, make sure, are we all seeing that?
Not yet.
No. Oh, let's see, resume share. Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to try it one more time. See if we do that. Oh, what happened here?
We even tested before everyone joined and it worked.
Yes, we did.
I always forget to hit it twice with Zoom because in Teams you only have to do it once.
Okay, hold on one second. Let's see why. Oh, I wonder if I have to do this.
There we go.
Ah, okay. It's a Mac thing. So, all right. And you're only seeing the presentation, correct?
That's right.
Okay, super swell. Then we're going to try and figure out where so I can see you. Okay. I think we're going to do this. I think it's going to be awesome. Great. So my name is Paige Watson. I work for Industrial Logic as a senior technical consultant. Today we're going to use a little tool called Slido. If you have not used it, you just go to slido.com and you put this number in there, and it's like a real-time survey, part of the presentation type of thing. So that number will show up every time we do the slide. So if you miss it or aren't able to grab it now, don't worry about it. There is a Q&A section on that slide. I probably won't be looking at those questions and such. So if you want to, you can just raise your hand, or you can type in the chat and or even just interrupt me. I'm very much about making this a discussion, because a lot of the things I talk about are sort of very different from how you would a lot of companies make software and processes they use. So things that are interesting, exciting, or confusing, just let me know and we'll have a conversation about it. So, not that one. Okay, so let's test out Slido by playing a fun game of 3 truths and a lie. All right, so the first truth is that when I was writing a 5,000 plus line BASIC file when I was in high school, I had BASIC magazine, and it was supposed to render a picture of Farrah Fawcett. I was so excited, but I got all the way through it, and there was a bug, and it didn't render. It didn't even compile, and I just about gave up programming forever right at that time. In 2000, I heard about XP development from a coworker, and I said, "Hey, do you want to try it with me? We could try this pairing thing." And he just looked at me and laughed. Now that's what I do, right? That's I left a lucrative career in the adult entertainment industry to teach the world to build better software. I'm one of the only 3 people in the world to attain the extremely hard to get certification of FaST, certified FaST instructor. And I played in several bands with internationally known rock stars. Right, so 3 truths and a lie. If you go on to Slido, you'll be given the choice of picking one of those. And I give everybody a minute. Why don't you choose the one you think is the lie? Just about there. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah, that one gets a lot. That one gets a lot. So what's the answer? Well, in 2000, a friend of mine came to me that I worked with and said, "Hey, there's this really cool thing. called XP, and it's like two people working on the same computer, and you're supposed to be able to, like, get both people's minds into the code and really do great stuff. And would that be interesting? You want to try that out? And I was like, idiot, no way. So here I am. That's what I do now, is I teach people great practices around XP, but probably not something that actually would have thought of back years ago when it first came out. So I'm going to talk a lot about time at Premera Blue Cross, which is a Washington State Blue Cross insurance. This is kind of where we came up with FAST, where it sort of came about. When I joined Premera Blue Cross, we had a team of about 20 what we call T-shaped people, right? The generalist across the center, and then specialties going down. We had people with strengths in DevOps and test and business analysts, and of course, developers, leaders, all that sort of thing. We had a really great leader, and I use that term because he was a great leader. He was a director level. He was the only person that was sort of the manager above us, and yet he wanted us to do great work, and he was willing to allow us to experiment, right? So we had that opportunity to set our own team processes and practices. We had a great set of developers that wanted to do more than just show up and write code, right? So when I started there was about 20 of us. We were doing sort of a Scrum Kanban mix. We regularly tried experimenting. We did some things like HR had asked us we were a fairly new greenfield team. We were making a survey engine, and a survey engine for when you called support, and how well did that go? How'd that support call go? And some mobile apps, and we were working at the time with C# and Azure and SQL Server mostly. I skipped around, didn't I? Okay, go back to the HR thing. One of the things that really impressed me was that they had asked us, like, what to come up with titles and roles and that sort of thing. And we actually got together as a team and decided that we were going to be solutions providers. That was the title of everybody on the team. We didn't have developer 1 and developer 2 and senior business analyst. We were all solutions providers. I think that really kind of set the tone for the workplace. And so we'll go back to Slido, and I'm going to ask you, what makes a great workplace or a great team? Right? What types of things have you been on or heard about or want to be part of that makes your workplace or team great? And I'll give you a couple minutes. We'll fill this out. Oh man, these are good. I totally think we're right on here. Of course, I'm speaking to an XP developer group or an XP group, so I think we all have the same basic beliefs around working together. But all of these things, psychological safety, collaboration, that willingness to fail, and wanting to continually learn, having great people who respect and empower each other, all that sort of thing, definitely was something that we had at Premera, and that we cultivated, and was really important to the way we work. And that's really important because I don't know that FaST-Agile and the things that we were doing would have necessarily come about had we not been able to be, to do all these great practices. One of the things that we found was really important, and I believe is really important for all teams, is team chartering. This is just a overview of a charter we did not too long ago. I don't think there's anything in here that really, is that I shouldn't be showing you. But it's really important when we're forming teams, when we're building teams, to talk about how we want to work together. What are our agreements? There's some extra things. Our context diagram here, probably not as important. I think it's important, but it doesn't always have to be there. But things like your community is really good, and your committed resources. Our community in this case is everyone who is remotely even connected with anything that this team is going to do. And it comes out in a way of like, oh, we're having trouble logging on to this service or this server, or the firewall's not letting us through this. Let's go to the community board and see whose name has the word security next to it. Doesn't matter what their role or title is. In this case, there's a VP on there of security. So whenever we had a problem, boom, right to him, because that's the person that's gonna allow us. Maybe they're not going to clear up the issues for us, but they're going to at least point us in the right direction. And those people on the community were part of this discussion about team charting also. We have our mission, our vision, our objectives. That's important. But the biggest part of this that I think is most important is really, I think, your community agreements, your working agreements. And you'll notice this is one, again, that we did, that we split into two. We split into working agreements, which is more about practice, and designed alliances, which is more about how we think or how we interact personally, right? So you'll notice some things about using Slack, don't disappear, collaborative working on the left side. We had a time zone where we're going to say we're working in the central time zone. So every time we talk about time, whether it's meeting or whatnot, we're going to use central time so that everybody knows, right? On the right side, we had things like manage risks early and often. That last responsible moment was really important. Let's not make decisions that we can put off until it's the last responsible moment, not the last possible moment, but the last one that it's responsible to make that decision. Assume positive intent and things like that, how we interact. This is all really important, and we continually come back to this and talk about it regularly and update it. And I think that helps to really sort of congeal and build the team that wants to work together in a great way. So here are some of the agreements that we had at Primera Blue Cross. And some of these I'm just going back through memory because this was 7-8 years ago when we started this, maybe. And they're not in any order necessarily, but we really wanted to promote a natural leadership. We wanted to allow anyone who wanted to be, or I don't want to say be a leader, but grow themselves, to evolve their ability to do so. And we often made a real big point of that in that, well, I could go do something. I would often, give that opportunity to someone else and say, I could do this. Would you like to try this instead? Would you like to try making sure that we get the right connections with this other team or whatnot, and sort of self-promoting those people inside of the team to evolve their own leadership. Code quality and collaboration was a super important part of how we worked. We agreed that at the time we started out pairing. Eventually we were working collaboratively and ensemble mobbing, however you want to call it, but nothing went into production unless it went through the hands of another person. Not even, spikes or anything like that. We always had at least 2 people, usually more. We had a strong agreement around experiments and outcomes. We would make sure that we wrote down all of our experiments, that we had a starting and ending time, that we had a a question or a theory about what the experiment would get us. And then at the end of it, we would reflect and reevaluate and change it, try something new. And that, whether that was like, do we want to try 2-week iterations? Do we want to try 2-day iterations? Do we want to you know, how did that last one work and where do we want to go from here? We really wanted to promote self-organization, right? This was really important because as developers, we know how to make software. We know what's needed, and we wanted to be able to make sure the right people were working on the right things at the right time. So we didn't want to necessarily be told, like, here's the teams. This is kind of where our dynamic teaming came about. We had an agreement around conflict resolution, which is something that I think is so important that so many teams don't have. You know, being able to say you don't like a decision that's being made, and or when you have a conflict, even with like, how are we going to write this? How are we going to write this code? Well, I think we should do it this way, but the senior person really thinks we should do it that way. And how do we get around that? Because if we always do what the senior person wants, or you know, what's the hippo, the highest paid person in the room, like if we always do that, then we're sticking ourselves with this one thought process or belief system that person knows the best way. And maybe they do, but we'll never know for sure unless we learn to look at all the different ways. So how do we resolve conflict when it comes to other people on the team and how we interact? And that was a really important, we spent a lot of time on that. And we came up with a lot of ways of doing it. And I could talk about that if that's something that people have questions about. But the final one that we had an agreement around was team growth and learning. We wanted to make ourselves better. We wanted to make our code better. We wanted to make those around us better. We really made it a priority to become a learning team, and that we had kata practice. And actually we had people coming in, external people coming in to teach us. Fred George came in and taught several classes for us. Woody Zuhl would come in and teach classes. And out of that, actually out of Woody's, one of his suggestions was, you know, at Hunter Industries, they do that 1 hour every morning of learning time. We actually moved that into a single 3-hour block that was on Wednesday morning, and then actually eventually moved to Monday morning. So the really nice thing, we would come in on Monday morning, and the first 3 hours was time to learn and grow and sharpen the axe. And it was fabulous, right? It made going to work really excellent and so much more enjoyable at times. So how did this all come about? How did we get into this? Well, my friend, Quentin Ron Cortell, had this epiphany in 2014 when he was at an open space conference. And he thought, you know, if 800 people can self-organize a conference in 20 minutes, why aren't we using open space technology to solve agile scaling? And at the time, it wasn't really called FaST. He didn't really even have a name for it, but he realized that he had this idea about, you know, scaling around the work as opposed to creating teams and giving the teams the work. That maybe was something we could try. And we had that opportunity. So this is one of those, like, right place, right time, right thing to do. For those of you that aren't familiar with open space, let me talk a little about that. Harris and Owen came up with this, the general, what am I trying to say? The present day open space technology. And open space technology is about organizing. I guess the story is that he found that he was going to conferences and finding that he was skipping a lot of the structured, you know, talks and having these great conversations more in the hallway with like-minded people who also whether they didn't want to go to this talk or they'd already heard it or, whatnot. And so they were talking about things that were interesting to them. And he thought, how do we make this into an actual conference? And that's kind of where Open Space comes, is a great book to learn about that. There are 4 rules and 1 law around open space, and these are really important to FaST-Agile as well. And that's whoever comes are the right people, right? The people that show up are the ones that have self-selected themselves into an open space conference. And whenever it starts is the right time, and whenever it's over, it's over. So if we still, at an open space conference, if we still are talking and the time frame is up, instead of saying, okay, well, let's talk about this again sometime, instead we move the people that are interested to continue talking, move to another area that's open, and continue to have that conversation, continue to talk. Likewise, if I have an hour for a session and after about 30 minutes the popcorn stopped and everybody's like, oh, okay, and then we've talked about what's important, and that's okay. It's over. We can move on to something else. And then finally, whatever happens is the only thing that could happen. And this is really important because we can't expect things to happen that aren't going to. Like, whatever happens is the only thing that could happen for the people that are there, since we're the ones that are making the conference. Finally, the law of personal mobility says that, and this is also really an important one for FAST, if you are in a session and you are not actively learning or actively contributing to the learning of another person or the group, you have, I would say, almost the obligation to go to another place where you will actively be learning or actively be contributing to the learning of that session, right? This is really important, and this actually led us, this was one of the big things that we found when doing FAST, was really helpful in figuring out how we were going to reteam. But getting ahead of myself. So like, here's a picture of an open space conference. I think this was in Atlanta, maybe 2014. This might have been the one that Ron was at. But there's about 800 people, maybe not that much. Maybe there's a couple hundred people here, right? They're having the opening circle. You'll notice everybody's sitting around. There's those giant Post-its in the center. When they open the circle, then everybody will come up and take a giant Post-it and write a topic on it. And on one wall, you've got a grid with rooms across the top and times going down the side. And someone will say, for instance, there's one over here, product discovery tips and questions. They'll say, I'm interested in talking about this. Doesn't mean they're the most knowledgeable, but it means that they have an interest in sort of stewarding that topic through the process of an open space session. And they'll go put it on the wall and they'll be like, I'm going to be in the silver balloons room at 2:15. Right? And someone else will come up and they'll put their name or their topic on something, and they'll put it in a slot, and they'll fill up this conference for the day. Right? They'll dynamically create this full conference, and it's really only about a 20 to 30 minute process once you get rolling with the marketplace. And as a side note, I think it's fabulous. These are my favorite types of conferences because, again, the people that show up are the ones that want to be there and want to have the good conversations. So how do we take this open space idea and how do we move it into forming around the work? So one of the ways, I'm kind of out of order here. Interesting. Okay. One of the things we came up with was this idea of self-organizing. We wanted to try some experiments around letting ourselves choose how we wanted to work. And we were finding that we were having way too many meetings. We have a meeting for design, and a meeting to talk about what was upcoming, and a meeting to, to talk about how we interacted with other teams, or the other teams that we were really closely associated with, or other departments, whatnot. And one of the big problems we found was that they were taking up way too much time. So we decided to get rid of them, right? How do we get rid of all the meetings that we think we need, but we don't really need? How do we make it more efficient so that we can get more work done, right? That was really about it. So we started an experiment, and we decided we would try having an open place market, like a modified open space marketplace, and see if we couldn't have a short meeting. And this is where the name comes from. We had a FaST meeting that would last about 30 minutes, and see how we could organize around the work instead of organizing around the teams, right? Here's one of our very first experiments with the FaST meeting, right? And we would write everything up on the board, or on a giant Post-it note. We were very much about radically communicating all the information. So I've got a lot of pictures of giant Post-it notes or posters with information on them. Our meeting, we decided, okay, we're going to have some sort of group activity or icebreaker. Sometimes that was stretching as a group. Sometimes that was, just kind of like, how was vacation type of time. Introducing new people. We often had guests. So sometimes we would talk, introduce ourselves to the guests, or have them introduce themselves. We added announcements. You can see it's kind of smaller. We added announcements because we figured, you know what, we're all in the same place. Let's talk about what announcements we have at the time. And then we would start with recapping our process. Let's talk about what we actually do and how we do it for anybody who needs to know. First we have our meeting. We basically read down this meeting like kind of like I'm doing here. We worked in what we called value cycles. Here we still use the word iterations, but we would close the previous value cycle, which meant this was a good time to demo or show and tell. But we didn't always have to have something to demo or show and tell. The value cycle itself was not about getting things done, getting a block of code or work done. It was about adding value, continually adding value. And sometimes that value was that, we tried going down this direction. We thought this was going to work, and it's not. So what we learned was that maybe we need to go in another direction, or that this work was going to be so much bigger than we thought it was. So, we learned that we're going to split this up and maybe put it into a couple groups. Sometimes it was show and tell. We would do a turn up the good that again comes from Woody Zuhl. We found that retrospectives weren't working like we wanted them to, right? That whole like what went well, what didn't go well type of thing. And the didn't go well stuff always came back up again. The stuff, especially the things we couldn't control, there was no use in really talking about it. If we could control it, we would fix it, change it. If we couldn't, there was no use sort of talking about it over and over and over. So instead, what we decided to do was, let's talk about the things that went really well. What did we like? What worked really well for us? And let's do more of it. This is how we got into to mobbing full time. We had Woody come in and talk and teach us about it, and we tried it out. We were like, well, that was pretty good. Was it good enough that we want to keep doing it? Yeah. Do we want to do it sometimes or all the time? Do we want to, let's turn up those things that are really good. Hey, we had these other people that joined us from this other team for our meeting, and our communication grew, and we were really excited that we got great feedback from them. Okay, let's do more of that. Let's get lots of people from other teams, you know, and have that face-to-face communication. So turn up the good was a really exciting part of this. And then we would plan the next iteration. And I'm going to go through this really quick because I'll also talk about this a little more as we move forward. But we would have our POs set direction. And that means that they weren't necessarily coming up to say, I want you guys to work on this and this and this. They would come up and give the rah, here's our product, we're excited about it speech, right? And continue to set that, we're working really hard to get this great product out the door so that our customers can give us good feedback so that we can continue to grow our business, right? Even that high level talk was, you know, that was their setting direction. We would have stewards, and the stewards were like very much in the open space. They were the people that were not necessarily the SMEs or the ones who had the most knowledge, but they were the ones who had the most excitement around stewarding work through the process. I would say they weren't like if a story got blocked or stuck, or we had to, you know, interact with another team or something like that. They weren't always the ones, they weren't the ones that had to do it. They weren't the ones that were required to, you know, unblock it. But their job was to help find someone that maybe could. Their job was to help radiate that information. Maybe if we were using some sort of tracking system, their job might be to update the tracking system with whatever that, you know, how far we got or notes or whatever. Their job's to steward it through the process. Oh boy, I just lost my place. Look at that. So the POs would set work. We had 5 work in progress slots. The POs would put 5 about 8 or 10 things that they wanted to see that they thought were the most priority. And when I say POs, I think when I left, we had 3 different product owners. And so they would put maybe 5 chunks of work that they'd like to see worked on. 5. They would put like 8 chunks of work that they would like to see worked on the board. And I'll show you the board in a minute or two. And the steward would step up and pick one of those and say, I'm going to work on the login page and I'm going to be in room 1. And they would put their name onto it, their name on a magnetic name tag in room 1 and put that sticky with the work on it in there. And we would go through and other people would step up and take work and put it in a slot until we had 5, which was our WIP limit. And then once that would happen, everybody else would take their name tag and put it on what they were going to work on. And we would self-organize and dynamically reteam to move to where we were the most helpful, and going back to the law of personal mobility, where we could affect the quality and the output in a positive way, or we could learn from that group we were working with. And then we would go forth and do all the things. And I know that's a lot of discussion about it and sort of a very high level overview. So I actually want to stop for a second and give everybody a chance to ask questions or ask clarifying information. Does anybody have anything? Not, I'll keep going, but I'm gonna have a drink of water. Oh, okay, awesome.
So, sorry, Paige.
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
mentioned the stewards.
Yes.
So I guess in this context, were they developers or anybody? Just was somebody who was passionate about something that was in the direction that the product owners had set?
Yes, it could be anybody. So again, we were all solutions developers. Okay. So it was anybody that was part of the larger collective is what we called it, the group. So maybe let me go on to some pictures. Here's us. We had a person that was the market facilitator. very much like the facilitator in open space. They basically ran the meeting, made sure the marketplace process got we went through that meeting and did all the steps, right? Again, not the boss, not just the person interested in it. And we rotated this role pretty regularly. We had all these people who were part of the team. Any one of these could choose to steward a story through the next process, next value cycle. And our value cycles, for the most part, except for a couple of weeks, were very short. And when I say very short, we were working in 2-day cycles. So, oftentimes work didn't necessarily get done, and somebody who was stewarding it, who was interested in seeing this work go through the process to be finished, would continue to be the steward each time. But it didn't mean they had to. It just meant at the time we did the meeting, at the time we started our value cycle, they had interest in working on a certain story. And a lot of times they would step up and say, I'm going to work on this story. I'm going to work on maybe the login page, right? I need someone who knows security. We're going to use OAuth 2.0, and I haven't used that. And someone that has, please come join us. And I need someone that knows the database and where we put this information and how we encrypt the password, et cetera, right? So again, they didn't have to be the most knowledgeable. They just had to be the person to make sure that the story moved through the process and that the people that were needed were part of it. Does that answer your question? I'm gonna say yes, because I don't see him there, but let's go back to, here's one of our POs, right? Our product manager. I guess that's kind of interchangeable. He was the person in charge of the product that we were working on. Notice where he is in the process. His job is not to really be part of this anymore. His job at this point is to stand back and be there to answer questions and to bring clarity to where we're going. But his job isn't to assign the work. His job isn't to say, oh gosh, this is really this, like this one thing has to get done. His job is to say, here's a bunch of things that I think need to be worked on. Pick some of them, please. One of the really interesting questions that come out of this when we do this, or when I talk about this, is I often get this question of like, well, if you're asking your PO to put 8 or 10 things on the board, and you're only picking 5 of them that your teams are gonna work on, what about the stuff that nobody wants to do? What about those things that are like, cut and paste the 10,000 lines from the text file into the database, right? And the answer is that it gets done. Maybe it's an iteration or a cycle or 2 before it gets addressed, because nobody wants to do it, right? And there have been times when our product manager was like, hey, this has been on the board for the last 3 cycles and no one's picked it up. Why? Right? Not you have to do this has to get done, but the question is why? Why are we not doing this? And the answer is usually like, oh, nobody wants to do that. But really what happens is that because of the way we work, someone goes, fine, I'll do it, I'll steward it, and they take it and they put it into one of the marketplace boxes, the work in progress boxes. And they're like, I just need 2 other people to help me. Let's knock this out. We'll get it finished, and then we can get back to doing the fun stuff, right? There's a responsibility for the work that comes with being able to self-select your work. And in fact, the people that step up and and say, fine, I'll do it. Those are really the ones you want on your team, because they see that, yes, it stinks, but you know what? We'll get past this and we'll be fine. And then we go on to the fun stuff and the process will continue to work. So that's a really important thing to know, is that this process breeds that self, that team sort of responsibility, team ownership of the work. So I talked a little about dynamic reteaming. One of the really positive things we got from dynamic reteaming was that we get a good knowledge growth. We get rid of those silos. We allow the people, the team members, to choose to change groups at the beginning of every iteration. And that means that they either get to be sort of that, they get that team responsibility of, here's where I need to go, but they also start to see other parts that maybe they haven't worked on before. And they start to touch other areas and learn about them. And so, you know, if I'm really good at databases and but I'm not so great at UI, if I'm working on the UI aspect or a UI chunk of work, and the person who is really good at UI needs to not be at the office for some reason, they have a doctor's appointment or they get sick or maybe they get a new job, I don't know. But at least I have some understanding of how it works now. And so do a couple other people, and we can continue to work on that. The work doesn't come to a grinding halt. And so you're spreading that natural growth, or that natural understanding and that growth of knowledge between all the team members. You get a natural leadership, again, where somebody steps up and says, yeah, that I don't really want to do that stupid, you know, work, but I'll do it. Fine, I'll do it. Right? You get a team ownership of the work. It's not my code. I didn't write this code. We wrote this code. Right? We often talked in a way that, like, you didn't write a bug. Even if a bug made it into production, it was our fault because we let it get into production, as opposed to, you know, you were the developer on this, right? That's not how that worked when we were working collaboratively. So here's a quick picture of one of our boards. This was a smaller one. This was a sort of an offshoot, and sometimes we had these. The really nice thing about this style of work is that we could easily split up into smaller groups. The picture that I had back there, let me go back one. This picture of the whole team was near the end. I think we had 50 plus people on our team at the time, not to mention the POs. We had multiple POs. But we were able to easily split off into smaller groups if we needed to, and that group could run its own collective and have its own sort of FaST board. So here you'll notice that we have the 5 work in progress slots. Across the top, you see Hector and Ben and Eric and Hetal. They are the stewards. They have their name at the top of the board. They've chosen to be the steward for that work. For some reason, they didn't fill out a 5th one, but I don't know why here. And then the other people down below have put their name on the board to work with them. We also had several other areas, like one that showed the upcoming, you know, up and down times for our different environments, because they were going to be doing work. We had people on vacation. Here, these people are out. We can't expect them to be on the board this time. Things that were blocked and things that were next in line. If for some reason there was work that got done and someone was like, oh, hey, what are we going to do for another half a day? Well, we can grab something that was next in line. But we would take all of the things out of the marketplace at the end of every iteration. And if it was done, obviously it would go away. But if it wasn't done, it would be up to the PO to choose, to put it back on the board or to leave it on the board sort of down below in the open area as part of the work to do in the next value cycle, right? Because we wanted to be able to pivot at any time or in very quick cycles. The PO could easily say, okay, yeah, that's not the most important thing right now, so I'm going to take that off and I'm going to put this on instead, right? So that short iteration really allowed us to do that. The work in progress limit allowed us to not stretch ourselves thin, but to continue to focus on the most important things that the app didn't do.
Paige, it looks like there's a question from Nikki in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Recommendations to apply this to a fully remote environment. So we are doing this on a with a company that I'm working or have been working with right now, and we're all fully remote. In fact, we're around the globe, and it works with some caveats that there is some learning and growth that has to happen, right? We do this with Zoom. We have a Zoom meeting that's always open. We have cameras on as part of our working agreement, and we use breakout rooms. So we kind of do this process through that. It's a little bit modified, and I think that's going to happen at any company, but it works online. It's a learning process as to, learning to be a steward, learning to dynamically reteam, right? It's really hard, and self-select your work, and not just from a developer team standpoint, but from a PO standpoint as well, to allow the team to do the work that they know how to do, and say, look, I trust that you guys have the best interest of the company and my product.
Hello.
Right.
Yes.
So does that answer your question, Nikki?
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. It's as with anything sort of radical and new, it takes some practice, and it takes some team like psychological safety and a lot of work to be able to do good collaboration. But it is possible to do online, and I've done it remotely. I've done it in like two companies now, and I know other people have as well. Other questions before I continue to move on? Sort of. Okay, let's see what else I got. So we made it a big point to collaborate, and this is called mobbing, ensemble, whole team programming. Doesn't matter what you call it. The idea is that you get a group of people, as Woody would say, all the people that need to be there to create the great software at the time, or are there at the time the great software is made. You'll notice we have two of those groups here, and I think we had 5 or 6 different stations set up like this, large TVs, one computer connected to the TV. We had these two groups in this case that sat next to each other, and there were times when we would be working on something and the other group would be like, hey, we're going to touch this. What are you guys doing? And we'd actually merge together, into one group for a little bit, work on some code, commit it, and then split back up. You'll notice that facing away from us, there's a guy in the center or on the right side. He's the one that's typing, but on the left side of the table facing away from us was the database guy. And he's actually looking up data and coming up with like the SQL query so that when it comes time to put that into the code, it's ready to go right there. Right. So when we were collaborating, doesn't necessarily mean that one person typing and everybody else sitting around watching. There were there were a lot of different roles going on here. There's a business analyst and people who were stronger in testing, and they were all there. The right people were there at the time that the great software was made. Again, does really require some psychological safety, some practice collaborating, the ability, I often talk about the ability to kind of give up your id and say, I may know great things, I may not know the best thing in this case, and I'm willing to continue to learn and grow from it. There were several things that came out of, like, not necessarily core to the idea of FaST-Agile and the modified open space marketplace that we used, but things that we often talked about in terms of radiating information, making our work visible. One of those things that we came up with was what we called discovery trees. And discovery trees, the idea was that, again, sort of instead of having these meetings and breaking down all these things into chunks of work that then we could write stories on and kind of figure out how long each one's going to take and whatnot. What we ended up doing was we had a general overarching idea of the outcome that we wanted. In this case, if you look at the left one, we used a window, we used whiteboards. But we found that windows and whiteboard markers work really well. So the idea, the story here is we want to deploy to the Windows Store. And we actually, if you look on the top left, we've got a number 792. That's our JIRA ticket number or whatever it was that we were using towards to track at the time. But that was all we needed. None of the rest of them are tickets or stories or anything to that effect. What we would do is we would start with the top layer and we would start to break down our work until we got to a point where we could say, is this something that we could work on and get finished in half a day, couple hours? If the answer was yes, then we would stop breaking everything else down and we would start working on that with a bias towards action. We would just, in this case, we would just do the smallest chunk we could to move us forward. Once we were done with that, we would go and go to the next thing and say, is this a chunk that's large, that's small enough we could do it in half a day or a couple hours? And if the answer was yes, we would start work on that. If the answer was no, we would break it down farther and until we got to that. And one of the things that we really liked about this was being able to radiate that information to anybody, in this case, anybody that walked by. But you'll notice there are boxes on the left that have ticks in the corners, and there are boxes that have lines through them, right? The ticks in the corners means they have been started. The lines through them means that they've been finished. And if I ask you to tell me of the very top deploy to the Windows Store, what percentage is done right now? You could probably look at that real quick and even just by looking at the top level, say maybe a little more than 50%, right? Because we're looking at what's done versus what's in progress. When something got done, we would mark it off and we would remove everything underneath it. So there's a third one down in the third row called, it says app project. There was probably other things underneath that, but since all those got finished, we just removed them. They weren't really necessary anymore. This is one of those things that really allowed us to sort of not just speed up our work, become more rapid in the way we did things, but allowed us to get rid of meetings that we thought were sort of unneeded, allowed us to radiate information. We use Miro for that right now for the teams I'm working on, Miro or Mural, one of those two. You'll see on the right-hand side, we use different colors for in process and done and that sort of thing. And actually, my next slide, I'll show you. Here's one that we have for, this is one of the newer places that I've been working with. But here we use colors to say green is done, orange is in process, yellow is not started. Things that had questions that we needed to come back to were in blue, and things that were punted, meaning that we weren't going to work on right now. It wasn't the last responsible moment to make the decision to do those. They would be in purple, and oftentimes they would get their own something in the backlog or ticket for later. But everybody that had connection with the teams that we were on has access to this mural board. So, C-suite, management, business, other developers, whatnot, all they have to do is click the link. They can quickly come in here and look and say, oh, look, I can see an order screen. They're about 50% done of the work that they know. And they're working on the tab display item. And they've kind of skipped doing the header and the tab room for later. And they have these 3 things that are yellow that they still are going to be working on. Really great way to radiate that information. Thoughts, questions on that? Okay, wow. Super excellent. I talked about team growth a little. One of our things that we really tried to do was have a weekly kata practice and a weekly learning time and bring in outside instructors. I think this is really important, although it's not necessarily part of the core FAST ideals. It's sort of tangential, and was one of the things that really allowed us to do FAST in a way that was effective, to continually get better, to continually grow as a team. Things like kata practice and learning time not only make you better as a developer, but also spread that sort of knowledge to the other people. We often tried to do this at the beginning of the week because we would be able to use that for the rest of the week. Oh, you know what? We just learned about this pattern, or we learned how to refactor this. We practiced splitting up work into smaller chunks of work. And now, instead of doing that on Friday where you go home for the weekend, you come back Monday and you're like, we sort of remember what we did here. Now you can actually start to apply that right away for the rest of the week. Some of the outcomes that we had at Primera, and I think this is the important thing, is that we ended up with a really high quality, scalable survey engine. And originally we had written it to be a survey engine for people that call the customer service line, right? How was your call? Was the person nice to you? Did you get your answer, your question answered, whatnot? But because of the way we worked, and because we were able to rapidly change our direction and really be agile, we found that not only was it easy for us to change the code and the application, we were able to extend it. So we started, sending out surveys for doctor's visits. We connected it into our database so that if you went to see the doctor, then the information would come from the doctor into the database, and within a day or so you'd get a survey of how to go. It was really easy to continue to add to that, and I think that was partly because we had a really good high performing XP team, or group of teams, I guess, one collective, but and partly because we were able to change our architecture and change our practices and change the direction we needed to go in very short iterations. We wrote a microservices architecture. This was something that we actually learned about first in our learning time. And someone was like, oh, I haven't done a microservices infrastructure. Let's spend a couple hours and learn about it. We learned about it, and then it was like, oh, well, how do we apply that to what we're doing? We were one of the first, we were the first team. And I say 5 teams, but I'm bet there are people that were working with me that will say it was many more. a lot of teams were trying to move data to the cloud. We were the first team that was actually able to do that at Primera. And that's because we were able to continually grow and learn and apply that learning. We were able to create a Siri app, and that was one of those things that came out of learning time that we were like, oh, this is interesting. Can we do this? Can we make something for work that would be helpful? You know, so now you can actually say, hey, Siri, what's my balance? And Siri will text you a password. You tell them the number that Siri texted you, and they'll say, well, you know, your current balance is $12.48, and you have, you know, X amount left on your account and whatnot. Your last payment was on this date, and your next one's due on this date. That was not something that the business or the project management teams came up with in terms of like, hey, let's build this. This is something that came out of our learning times and our ability to choose our work and actually be part of the what's my word? Gosh, now I just went blank. But this was something that we as a team came up with and went to the company and said, we think this would be a good thing. Is this a project that you guys would like? And you can actually go, I believe this is still one of those benefits that they list. Use Siri to check your account. We had a great growth of team and individuals. And then, of course, all this we wrote down, and it became what's called FaST-Agile today. This is one of those things that I was talking with Woody about this a couple weeks ago when we were in Manchester together. And like mobbing, you know, they were doing some great stuff at Hunter, and they were mobbing. But if they hadn't done that there, I think there would be another place where someone would go like, hey, let's swarm on this. They'd be like, oh, that was great. Let's swarm on stuff tomorrow, you know, and let's try it every day. There are such good practices that I think that it would have come out anywhere. Mobbing would have taken hold because it's such a good practice for us as developers. FaST-Agile, these practices of dynamic reteaming and self-selection of work and collaborative working and learning together as a group, all these sort of things are fabulous processes that I think if we hadn't come up with it, would still be in effect, someone would somewhere, because I think that's just good practices that really good developers start to realize, like, oh, we should put the people that want to work on this, that have some knowledge that could be helpful, let's just put them on that team whenever we do the work. But as it is, Quentin Ron Cortell said, I'm going to write this down because I think we're onto something here. And so that's where I come with that's where FaST-Agile is coming from. A couple other things that I have, really positive outcomes that we had. We had a really good enjoyment of work. This is really important because we had a team where we would get up on Monday morning and you wanted to go into work. You were excited about it. Like, when was the last place that you were excited about going into work on Monday morning? And if you're not there right now, why not? Right? How do you make your company into that place where you're excited about it on Monday? I think that's so important. We had that emergence of natural leadership that we decided that was important to the company. We supported those around us, and we tried to allow anybody that was interested in any sort of leadership activity to grow that. We had a team ownership and a team responsibility for our work. We definitely had pride in it. We wanted to spread the knowledge and that responsibility and that ownership to everybody we touched. We wanted other teams. We often invited other teams to come be part of our stuff. Right? And we created better software at a more rapid pace, which ultimately is one of the really positive outcomes for the company. Some negative aspects, and there were a few, right? It's like working with FaST and working in this way, it's not for everyone. Collaboration is hard. We used to often say you have to be an adult to do this. And I kind of look back, and maybe that's not the best, maybe that's a little flippant to say, but what I really meant was there are a lot of people that want to come in, they want to, get their work, they want to do their work, they want to go home, and they do a great job and they work hard and it's important to them, and that's fabulous, right? I don't mean to say that's a negative. What I mean to say is that if you're doing FaST Agile, if you're dynamically reteaming, if you're using all these processes, there's a psychological safety and a maturity level that has to come with it, that responsibility, that personal responsibility, that you have to show up and be part of the team. And that is not easy. And it's not for everybody, and that's okay. There was biggest problem that we had was a corporate immune system, right? And this is that trust that has to exist outside of our collective, outside of our group. Oftentimes that means that managers have to give up their power, right? It can be really threatening to managers or other teams. We often heard things like other managers would come over and be like, could you guys not laugh so much? You're disturbing the other teams, right? And I guess we could, but we really enjoyed ourselves. We really liked the work we were doing. We liked how we were working, right? There's that, when you're working in a mob, there's a visual aspect of it, of 5 people sitting around on one computer, right? And so you have to manage that sort of thing. If one person's staring at their phone and playing video games or whatever it is, even if they're looking up something for the mob, it still presents in a weird way if someone walks by and sees, like, how come there's 4 people sitting around one computer there? Only one, right? And there were often like other teams that didn't like us because how come they get to work that way and we don't? Right? And that was things we couldn't control, but that was that sort of the corporate immune system eventually kicked in and said, yeah, you guys aren't doing the same thing as the rest of the company, and so we're going to try and get back to some sort of homeostasis. Maybe you should do Scrum like the rest of us, right? So unfortunately, I wish it had gone better, but those are practices that things that I don't think we realized that we had to deal with, that we didn't deal with at the time. High-level overview of FaST. We bring everybody together to work as a collective. We visually represent goals on a wall. We let the team self-organize to break down and do the work. And on a very short cadence, we sync and repeat the above steps. Right? And then I have a weird thing. I don't know why I have that in here. Probably should take that slide out. And then finally, one last Slido for those of us that are still here. If you could make a change tomorrow at your office and the way you work, what's that? What's one change you would make? What's one thing you would do to make work better? And I'm not even going to qualify what better is. Yeah. So I love the make more work more visible. I think that's always a positive. Trying an open space is a fabulous idea. One of the really great places to try that is a hackathon. That's a safe way for a company to try open space or FaST, without actually worrying about obstructing too much. Definitely ask Diana to come in. That's important. She's fabulous. all these things are great ideas. So yeah, good luck with that one. The convincing leaders to give up control it's a fabulous idea. And I would say, actually, if I could sort of self-edit that one, it would be convincing managers to give up control, because I think that leaders will give up the control that they need to make sure that the teams are able to do the work that they need to. But it's not an easy thing to get the managers to do. And that's a whole nother talk in and of itself. So, fabulous. I do have a 2-day industrial fast agile class where I teach core practices, dynamic reteaming, collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. I got to throw that one in there. And then if you want, I have a link to resources. This is online, and you can download this the slide deck, and there's links to all the other things I talked about in there. Yeah, and that's what I got. Thank you very much. Questions, comments, things we can talk about? Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if no one else will go, I have a question.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
So I'm actually on a team that I think would be really open to the idea of like dynamic work and selecting things like this. And I think we're large enough to do it. The one problem we've had up till now is no one wants to miss out on anything.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you'd run into that and like maybe some guidance on that, because I think everyone's like, well, I don't want to miss the context on that by not being in that part of the mob for the day.
It's I think that's a good problem to have. But I think that's something that, like, so without even knowing your team or anything about them, the first thing that comes to mind is this thought of like there's not a trust there that others will do okay. Right. And maybe that's just me sort of imposing my thoughts on that. Like if I can remember not like, boy, I don't want to miss that. And the reason that I didn't want to miss that is because I wanted to make sure it was done well for my own, I'm the one who knows how to do it really well. And so I want to be there just to make sure that nobody else messes it up. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's not. I think that if that's not the answer, if they're just, excited about the work and really want to be part of the work, then it becomes more of a discussion of, you have to go to the place where you are the most effective, whether that be effective in growing the code, making the code better, or learning. And that's up to you to decide. But we can't, you can't be everywhere at once. You just can't. And maybe there's a discussion, or maybe there's a learning time where, like, if it's really important, we're happy to go over this, let's take some time this afternoon, spend an hour or two, and I'll show you what we did yesterday when we were in this group and you were in that group or whatnot. But that's that's a tough one, especially if it's everybody. I think that the more you start to work on it, even if it's just like several senior people, often I see this maybe in senior people who have been there for a long time and probably worked on the product for years and are sort of the SMEs, and they feel sort of really personally responsible for all the code. Awesome. That's good. You need people like that, but you also need those people to start to be okay with letting others do it, and trusting that they're going to come to you when they have questions they can't answer. There's a lot in there, I think.
Yeah, no, I think I think we have the nicer of the two problems, because I think it is more junior folks who are new to mobbing and really sold on the idea of, hey, I'm gonna know everything the team's working on because I'm in the mob all the time. And so they're excited. Like, I think it is a great problem to have, because I think it is more, I don't want to miss out on anything, because then I'm not going to be up to speed on, whatever. But I do like the idea of then like having time to say, okay, we hit our heads against the wall and figured this out. Now we can show you what we figured out and things like that.
Yeah. And that becomes just sort of you can't do much about that. You're going to have to choose. And, if you get into a place where you're able to easily reteam, every cycle, every iteration, whatnot, maybe there's a little bit of a mitigation of that feeling where like, oh, now I can go work on that team. And James Shore has a really good talk that you can find online about FaST as well. And he has he diagrams the movement of people between the teams across iterations. And I really like that, because in the beginning, you see everybody moves every time. And then slowly, third, fourth, fifth iteration, now you're down to like 3 people moving, or a team that finishes all their work, they disband and they all move to different, but you start to realize like, there's not really that FOMO anymore, because I can move to where I'm needed. I can move to where I can learn, and I'm not going to be able to move to everywhere. And, and there's the people that start like, oh, I'd love to go work on that, but I'm going to finish this. This has got another iteration or 2 of work to do. I'm going to stay here, because they start to feel that responsibility for the code and the work.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm realizing I talked for a long time, and I very much enjoyed it, but I have a very hard stop in about 5 minutes.
No worries.
Not realizing it had been that long.
We are over time, so that's no problem. We appreciate it, Paige. So I will ask one last question. I haven't gone to that link yet, but if I wanted to learn more about FaST Agile, following your link will take me to resources?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So, and if you didn't get it, would you mind posting the link to the chat if someone missed the
yeah, let me
you can even do it to the meetup chat, or you can send it to me and I can put it on the meetup chat.
Okay. Let me go development. Let's just make it.
I'll publish this video hopefully tomorrow, and then I'll post the link in the chat for this meeting and meetup. So if you all want to refer back to it, you'll be able to find it.
Okay.
And by saying publicly, I have to do it tomorrow.
There you go. And I'm open to having conversations. If you want to ping me on LinkedIn and set up a coffee, let's chat about it.
Great. Well, we don't want to make you late. Thank you so much, Paige. Thanks everyone for joining, and hope to see you all soon again.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.